art always appreciates, and you get to live with it, and you enjoy it, and it creates the most wonderful conversations. Why would you not invest in art?
So just go for it.
100%.
Even if you have a small budget. I used to initially feel that investment in art is only for the super rich. Can a person with a monthly salary start investing with returns? Hello and welcome to my show. My name is Rishanka Jones, and today we'll be talking about Indian art. Not just for the love of it, but also for the money. Is art really a good investment? I have with me Mr. Kishore Singh. He has been a big part of the Delhi Art Gallery, and I'm going to let him introduce himself shortly. But if you are someone who's looking to invest in art or doesn't know where to begin, I think this podcast is going to be very helpful for you. So please just stay on, like, subscribe, and share, and let's just dive right into it. Welcome, Mr. Kishore.
Thank you. Thanks, Rishanka.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really grateful that we could make this work out.
The world of art is never easy.
Yes. So, Mr. Kishore, if you could talk a little bit about your background in art, where did you begin, and how you got involved with the Delhi Art Gallery, that would be wonderful.
A very strange story. I was never someone who professionally thought would be a part of the art world. I was always a writer, a journalist, an editor, an author, and that really was my world. Art was a passion. It was something that I enjoyed looking at and doing, and maybe collecting in a small way. At that point in time, it was really the head of Delhi Art Gallery who spotted my writings and kind of came after me, really, in a sense, poached me from the world of active journalism and the media and brought me into the world of art. There again, to publish books and to lead researchers and scholars, etc. And then one kind of educated oneself in the art movements in the world of Indian art. And because so much of it was raw and undocumented, for someone like me, it was a treasure spot. You could really find your way through, read, look for materials, investigate, and create the kind of interest and publications, documentations, and exhibitions that Indian modern art in particular has deserved for a long time.
Wow. So it just happened organically. You got into art.
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
writing about it.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so that's how you began with the Delhi Art Gallery, and I know it's one of the very renowned galleries in our country. Let's talk about Indian art. In the last 5 years, and I was doing a little research, I learned that the Indian art market has really boomed. If you're talking about auctions, art galleries, the market is anywhere from 1,000 crores to 3,500 crores. And people are really investing in Indian art now, which wasn't the case 5-10 years back. So someone who is a first-time buyer wants to start investing, where do they begin? And what is the budget that someone can work with? I used to initially feel that investment in art is only for the super rich. When you're talking about international artists as well, they are going millions, that art. Can a person with a monthly salary start investing with returns?
Okay, all right. That's a lot of questions in one question.
Let's split
over
it.
there. So let's try and go step by step.
Yes.
I think it's very, very important that if you're looking at art, there are some things you must understand. Yes, your ROIs are brilliant. The Indian art market is exploding, and we've been sitting at that inflection point for a long time, saying the time for Indian art is going to come. And the Western art markets have been stagnating over the last couple of years.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely. And we've been seeing that through the auctions and what's happening over there. The interest has now started shifting, more interestingly, from the international perspective into the South Asian art market and partly into the West Asian or the Middle Eastern spaces, where the ability to buy art, because there are museums coming up over there, and amazing museums coming up across the Emirati. You see that explosion happening. But to answer your question, how do you invest? The first thing, Shankar, for me, is you have to enjoy art. See, if it's pure investment that you're looking at in terms of buying, you're not interested in the art, it goes into a vault or a storehouse, you're not going to sit and look at it, etc. You want to see how you want to move it back into the market and treat it as a liquid asset. It is an asset and definitely a very strong asset, but its liquidity is still at a low point somewhere. If you think that you can buy 2 works of art and you'll get an amazing ROI, no. I mean, there is There has to be a way of collecting. So what do you collect? Do you collect only paperwork? Do you collect only drawings? Do you only collect, the major masters? There are so many ways of looking at and collecting. I can say, okay, I was born in year so and so. I'll collect art that was created in that year so and so. This is a specialized element that starts coming in. Then there is the very mental, subjective, curatorial eye. What is the quality that you're acquiring? I mean, yes, art will multiply over a period of time, but obviously something that is higher quality will go up much faster than something that is a mediocre quality by the same artist or artists. So that again has to be kept in mind. So how do you educate yourself? You have to read up a lot on art and artists and movements and where they belong. Because art, in a sense, is a reflection of your society and of your culture and of your country and of your civilization, the way nothing else is. So you have to start reading up a lot. You have to start visiting galleries. You have to see a lot of art. You have to speak to gallerists. You have to speak to dealers. You have to speak to art critics. You have to speak to curators. And yes, you must go to museums. Very definitely. That should be a part of your circuit because that's also what makes conversation so beautiful around art. What is it that enriches you? What is the artist trying to say? Are you able to understand it? Are they reflective of a certain period and a certain history and a certain context that will define that period, that decade, that generation for people to come? I mean, we're looking at art that goes back to the Indus Valley civilization, to the Egyptian civilization, the Chinese civilization, the Greek civilizations, the Italian civilizations, etc. Why do we go back into the past? Because their past, the stories are told by these objects, these works of art that we look up to. So art is about legacies as well. And I think you have to understand those legacies and the role your current body of artists will play over the next 100, 200, and up to 1,000, 2,000 years. Will this endure? As to your last point about funds, I think anyone can collect art. I mean, a Madhubani, which you can get for 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 rupees, is also a work of art. Someone's creating it. So, I mean, from little drawings that you can get from 50,000 rupees to, a lakh, 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs, it's sums are not important. The intent is important. And yes, as I said, unless you have a significant body of works that you can turn in, let's say, 5 years or 10 years down the road, etc., don't look for ROIs on 1 or 2 or 5 works, etc., because that's an unfair way of looking at either collecting or investing.
That's beautiful advice. I think a lot of people forget how beautiful art is, and there's so much history and work gone behind a painting. Some people just go in with the investment outlook that, we need to buy it and sell it in a few years. But I do want to talk a little bit more about
sure.
the investment bit because right now there's a fad going on in India that, okay, let's invest in art. They do not know how to begin, and a lot of them are not readers. They don't want to do the hard work of reading up. They don't want to do the hard work of visiting museums, but they just want to invest. So you said Madhubani is one.
I'm just saying anything. I mean, of course, in the moderns and the contemporaries, there are edition works. There's something called printmaking. Printmaking is less expensive. Photography is less expensive. There are younger artists whose works will be less expensive. So, yes, I mean, you can start almost anywhere, but define a budget for yourself. So, if you're starting out as an emerging investor, and let's use your term, investor rather than collector, which is what I prefer.
I mean, I can see a beautiful house. You're a collector, but I really want this podcast to be
about investing.
Yeah, sure. It educates people, and I think stage 2 is collection.
So the first thing, absolutely define your budget. That this is what I want to do in year one. I want to spend X amount of money, that however modest that be, and that I will sustain it for the next few years at this level or at an escalating, level, where I can raise it on an annualized basis. Take it from that point onwards, and then see where that budget fits in with what is an offer in the market. The thing is, if you go to a gallery, speak to gallerists. You have to create someone who advises you. Don't be the lonely person, because that's, if you don't have the gut to recognize good art, then the ROI is going to be problematic. So whatever your budget, whether it's modest to middling size to, of course, a high volume that you're able to bring onto the table, etc., you have to be guided by people. So build a team of people you can rely on. The art advisor. Now, the art advisor might be a dealer, might be a gallerist, might be a curator. And curators are often very good because they have nothing else in the game. They're not the sellers,
Yeah.
but they are the promoters. The reason I say proceed with caution on your own, particularly when it comes to emerging artists, is if you don't have the eye, you're not able to recognize which emerging artist is likely to be a long-term player. And how do you recognize some of these things? Is your artist promoted by a well-known gallery? Are good collectors buying the artist you're interested in?
Sure.
Because the collectors have a trained eye. They bring a lot to the table. So trust their instinct. Are museums collecting the works? Are galleries promoting them enough to take them to art fairs around the world? Are there books on them? Are there films on them? You have to see the muscle behind an artist or a group of artists to recognize, yes, this seems to be someone everyone is putting their trust into. So that's someone I should look at and start looking at. Of course, if you come in early, your budgets will take you a longer course. But even with the masters, don't forget, if you're looking at, let's say, the Indian modernists, and whether that's Raza or Souza or Tayyab Mehta or Husain or X number
These
of
go in
artists,
millions, Uncle.
they do.
Yeah.
And the genuinely high quality ones sell for 10, $15 million. And that price is going to keep escalating onwards. But for, their drawings can still be got for a few lakhs. You can get them for what, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. I mean, the price points are all available for even the best known names. Then what happens is, and whether this is the modern masters or the contemporary artists, a lot of works are also works that are repeated by form of editions. So sometimes, whether it's in printmaking or sculptures, you'll see somebody's doing an edition of 10, 15, or 5 or 6. So you can always buy an edition which is much cheaper.
What about serigraphs? Is investment in like a Husain serigraph?
Absolutely. So now always recognize that serigraphs, the numbers of the multiples will be much higher than a lithograph or an oleograph or, whatever. So even in printmaking, your selection is based on that. Yes, you get a Husain serigraph. You're paying far less, but your ROI will also be on that basis, cumulatively less than what is seen as a more limited edition work. And of course, as I said, look for the drawings, look for the smaller watercolors that they would have done. Not everything has to be a canvas. They've done all kinds of works over different kinds of materiality. And that becomes an interesting thing to also begin. For me, why I find the mid segment the most interesting is because suddenly you expand your range of artists. Now, India hasn't had only 10 artists or 20 artists. We're a country of 1.4 billion people. We've had brilliant artists, not just in hundreds, but in thousands. And their legacies are now coming to life as more people realize that they did such brilliant work. So galleries are curating special exhibitions of artists who are teachers who've now passed away, whose works are being discovered. Their values are going up. Start looking at those artists somewhere. And that segment is the one that is going to also explode along with the Indian market.
And that is more affordable right now.
That is much more affordable right now. Absolutely, yes.
We talked about how a lot of galleries now are like trying to, bring in old artists who somewhere got lost. Again, as a new collector, you walk into a gallery, it's so intimidating. There's so much art, it's also confusing. How do you spot a good piece beyond something that you just like a good piece of art? And I know this comes with practice. But what are one or two things people should look out for?
So as I said, train your eye, train your eye, train your eye. You said not everyone has the time. I have a feeling that one of the most critical aspects of this is to have at least some among your friends who are collectors or who know about art a little bit, because those conversations often while you're having a drink sitting at home in the evening, it's become the trigger point or the catalyst to looking at and going and saying, oh, this is what it means, this is what I like. Very often our reactions to art is very visceral. Oh, this is too dark, this is too melancholy, this is whatever. Why should art always be pretty? Art is a reflection of society. And if our society is not pretty, art is not going to be pretty. So let's go with the guts and gore as well somewhere. We've seen values in Indian art really go up from thousands to hundreds of thousands to the millions now. And something that what was $100,000, let's say 10 years back, is selling for a couple of million dollars today. So that rise has been long in the coming, but it's amazing. And this is going to continue because there's greater wealth in India, and therefore the investor base is coming not from just our main cities, it's coming from tier 2 towns and cities. So at the India Art Fair, for example, you have people coming from a Nagpur and a Raipur and a Surat who want to be part of the art world and see what's being shown. They want to be a part of the conversation. So you're seeing how it's kind of penetrating through the systems and getting into spaces that are very, very pivotal to driving up and creating a very strong foundation for the Indian art market.
So, deals and scams. So everyone's looking for a deal in art. You just don't know what is the right value for art. Like, how do you measure the value of a piece of art? Is it like the stock market or is it completely different?
There are never going to be definitives in the Indian art market because there's always going to be hunger for and significant works, iconic works, very high quality works. There will always be the top collectors and investors who will want those works for themselves. And usually that's what you see in auction houses playing out when few people start bidding very aggressively for a work and values rise up very strongly. But always be suspicious of a deal. Look, when we buy property, we do so much due diligence. Why do we not do it when we're buying art? Because art is expensive. Art is going to be something that you will also leave very much for the next generations. Yes. So you need that same degree of due diligence. Why are you getting a deal? If you are getting a deal, take it to professionals and ask whether it's kosher or not. With values rising, the number of fake works in the market is growing. You do not have the eye to spot a fake. How are you going to do it? You have to show it to professionals. You have to validate it through them. So if you're not very confident of yourself, if you still don't know enough people to go to, usually galleries are a good space to go into. But if you are still building up those levels of trust, go to the auction houses because they've already done their due diligence. Their reputation is on the line. Many of them, the Christie's and Sotheby's and Bonhams are hundreds of years old. The top auction houses here are now 20 and 30 years old as well in India. They're creating very strong legacies. They've done all the research. They've found out everything that there is to be found. So there's a greater sense of transparency and access over there. So start with the auction house, build up your confidence, then start going to galleries and art fairs where, yes, the prices are put out there. Everyone is looking to sell, so no one will be silly to put a price
that's unreasonable.
That's unreasonable. Okay. And yet you might find it high. If you find it high, look around, shop around, ask around. But there's also a price for quality. Every Husain canvas of the same size will never be the same price. He had his high peak points. 10% of his works will be sold at a price that is more than the market premium. And this is true of all artists.
So when you're looking for these deals, is this a myth or a fact that you get better deals in auctions than art galleries? Because I would assume that in auctions, the price just keeps going up depending on demand, right?
So kamsi kamsa. So I mean, usually your battles happen for high quality works at the top end of the marketplace itself. There's a whole lot of works that are far more accessible. So, in any auction, spot 4 or 5 works that you have an interest in and start putting in bids for those works somewhere. You may not be certain of getting one work, but that's whatever your kitty is can be deflected to the next work. The problem with an auction house is in your excitement of bidding, sometimes you exceed the levels you've established for yourself.
Yes.
So that, you get carried away by that moment, that adrenaline is working in. But also keep in mind that there is a buyer's premium over the top of a work that you've purchased. So a buyer's premium is anywhere from 15 to 20% over the cost that the auction house makes. Then there's GST on top of it, your tax component, etc. So be aware that even as you're bidding, that component is also something you must keep in mind. With a gallery, if your interest is in one or a group of artists or a number of artists, they can show you a wider range of works by that artist. In an auction house, what you see is what you get.
Yes.
So, and you can always, over a period of time, become friends with your gallerist to say, this is my budget, this is what I want to do, look for works that suit my needs, this is what I'm looking for. You may not get it in 2 months or 3 months, you'll get it in 6 months, you'll get it in 8 months, but you'll find what you're looking for.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Do you have any artists in mind who you think may really become known in the future and it's a good time to invest in their art?
Okay, let's not get into names because
Okay.
that's a little unfair, I think, to anyone.
Because there's so many out there.
Also, I mean,
Or some galleries or places where people can go find art.
so I would say if you're looking at art, look with 50,000, 1 lakh, etc. Yes, you can use that as a base and then move your way up. You can start with printmaking, and printmakers' works are available. As I said, you can start with photography, you can start with drawings, etc. You can start with small watercolors and then scale up. You can also get canvases by artists for a lakh, etc. What are the places that you go to look at? Now, you're based, I mean, your viewers are all over. We're doing this in New Delhi. In New Delhi, I would urge you to go into a place like Triveni, for example, which has 4 or 5 galleries. There is a turnaround of exhibitions that are happening constantly over there. And you will find younger artists, because that's what they promote, coming in over there. And yes, you can find works at low prices. There are groups of galleries, I mean, if you go into Lado Sarai area, for example, in Delhi, where the range of galleries is so extensive. Again, you can start on a low enough budget and move your way up. There are shows that happen at places like Bikaner House, for example, which are again turning around constantly. You'll find very interesting material, and very often you'll meet the artists themselves. And I think when you start a conversation with an artist and enter into that very special private space, there's a way that it changes how you look at and address art, etc. I would say, I mean, my advice is if you're looking at art and if you're looking at art and looking at ROIs, investments, things like that, start with around 2 lakhs. For 2 lakhs, I can get an F. Souza drawing. So I have a master that I put on my wall, which will give me an ROI a few years down the line, but I also have a conversation piece. So I have so many things within that budget. And I start moving up from that point onwards somewhere. And yes, I mean, buy a batch of work, live with them, sell them, because you've now got a better return. You've got a bigger payload to buy your next and your next, etc. You can always supercharge your collection.
So Triveni is a good place to go look at for starters.
Triveni, Bikaner House, India Habitat Center, the Lado Sarai set of galleries over there. Come to places like the India Art Fair. Amazing spaces.
And when does that happen?
That happens in January, February. It's an annual event. Art Mumbai happens in November in Mumbai. Go to the Kochi Biennale, which starts in December and runs till March. Spectacular space to see and view art, though it's not a buying space. Biennales are never buying spaces. So there are lots and lots of spaces that are art hubs in a city. And I think we should frequent those spaces. Go to the cafes, have a meal, meet friends, visit the gallery. What a lovely way to spend a couple of hours.
What about the Indian diaspora? They have also discovered that Indian art is going up in price. It's a good investment. What are some options for them to buy Indian art? There are a lot of online platforms right now selling Indian art. Is it safe for them to buy art from there?
So the Indian diaspora has actually been responsible for moving a lot of the prices. They started buying fairly early when the Indian economy opened up.
Yes.
Uh, and the diaspora started taking this huge sense of pride
The
in their
Indian art.
roots and culture and stuff. So you do the food and you do the fashion and you do the film. Then what next? So literature and art follow very closely. Art has a price that literature doesn't. And art started getting collected through very large numbers, particularly in the Western Hemisphere.
Yes.
So London has always been a very important market. New York has always been a very important market. Palo Alto has always been a very important market over there. Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai now, Abu Dhabi, these are all critically
markets.
important centers. And as we've gone out and shown art and talked about art, we're finding that the reactions to Indian art, even in spaces like you go to Seoul, South Korea, and the reactions are amazing and they buy your art. South Korea is an amazing space. It has the largest number of private museums in any one city, for example. So, they again suddenly started collecting art over the last 2 decades. And that's the way I think we're also moving, the direction we're moving in somewhere. So, the diaspora, yes, has a very important role to play in visibility on international platforms and through a certain status that they brought in because they're also members or boards of various museums in the communities that they belong to. So most of these end up buying from auction houses, whether the international or the Indian auction houses that deal in South Asian art. They also buy online. The online platforms run by the auction houses are absolutely safe places. But other online platforms, of course, you again have to check. There is always the prankster. There's always someone who's scamming you somewhere. You just have to keep your eyes open and say, okay, these guys have been reliable. They've been here. They've been doing this for 5 years or so. That's what we need to follow. But anyone who pops up, obviously, you need to find out.
And I was recently talking to an art curator, and he said that there's certain Indian artists who are not allowed, like their work is not allowed to be taken out of the country. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, why is that?
Yeah, it's a bit of a stumbling block when you're buying art, and particularly when you're investing in art, because you want art not to recognize, barriers and boundaries, political boundaries, etc. Yes, if there are customs duties, that is understandable. But the Indian government, in its wisdom several decades ago, had decided that any works of art that are over 100 years old cannot be moved out of the country. So that was meant to protect India's legacy. But in a sense, it's become a stumbling block because it also means that the world cannot see your art unless it comes here. That's one. The other is in the 70s, the government chose 9 artists called the 9 national treasures and said their works cannot be taken out of the country. And these include Rabindranath Tagore, his nephews Aban and Gaganendranath Tagore, Nandlal Bose, Jamni Roy, Raja Ravi Varma, Amrita Shergill, Thelaus Mukherjee, and one Russian artist, Nicholas Roerich. So these are the 9 artists. But again, it means that you're stifling things around them. If you want to celebrate them, you don't restrict them, you share them with the world. That is what you need to do somewhere. We're hoping, all of us who are part of the art world, at some stage, this will change because in another decade, even your Husains and Susas and Razas, their early works will also become the 100-year rule.
Yes.
So I think somewhere better reasoning will follow. I think this was done because of sense of vulnerability as a young nation in our confident country. I don't think we need to worry about these things, etc. But in terms of ROIs, this does, if I'm buying a brilliant Jamni Roy and I can't take it out to my, because I have a house somewhere else, it's a pity, isn't it?
I saw a small one, Jamni Roy only, and I think they had restored it because it was so old. And he just refused to. He asked me where you're going to take it, and since I don't live here, he said you're going to have a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning for me because I had no idea that you can't carry Indian art outside the country.
Yeah. As I said, these 9 artists and anything over 100 years old. But I mean, a lot of art moved out before these rulings came in the 70s. So there is a lot of old art which is there out in the world and which is auctioned, which you cannot, and therefore you can collect your Jamni Roys outside the country. Remember that. You can always buy an
So it's
international
still a
auction
good
outside. Yeah. Anything that's outside can be sold and kept outside. Once
These
it comes
nine
into
artists,
the country, you can't take it out.
but are these 9 artists still a good investment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Bengal school, Rabindranath Tagore, he's a Nobel laureate. Can you imagine? Nandlal Bose, what an amazing body of works he created. Abanindranath Tagore introduces the Bengal school. Nicholas Roerich, I mean, you have Nicholas Roerich societies all over the world. So, yeah, they're absolute stars, each one of them.
Wow. Okay, so controversies. There's so much controversy around MF Hussain, the work he did, around those religious paintings he made, nudes he made. How have you navigated those conversations when you talking to your clients? Because I'm sure a lot of clients have questions about, does this increase the value of art? Does it decrease the value of art? Like, what are those conversations like?
Okay, so Hussain, and it's really sad that he spent the last 6 years of his life outside the country on self-exile. Too many cases against him over here. Art has had the nude as a figure that was created in the West for the enjoyment of usually male patrons who were buyers of art. That tradition is a very old one, and it brought in something called the male gaze into the Indian art world. It was heavily criticized and has been subject of a lot of conversations over the last decades, etc.
Sure.
But art and the art world moved far beyond that. I mean, there was a certain period when realism in art was extremely critical and important. Today, modern art and contemporary art totally has relegated that into the shadows of history somewhere. In India, we've always had the tradition of, and I say this very deliberately, of never the nude, but the unclothed body. It's a very interesting thing. When we look at a lot of sculptures and our temple sculptures, etc., when you go in, etc., even the unclothed body over there is never technically nude, because if you tell a sculptor that you want a certain figure carved out and done specially for you as a commission, he will insist on putting in a chain, a piece of jewelry, a ring, a girdle, something. And if you say, no, I don't want it, he will say, no, this is a woman's figure. She can never be unclothed in that manner. So our tradition prescribes a certain respect that comes into play, even when the unclothed figure is being created. Now, that tradition is a part of all art, whether it's modern art or contemporary art, etc. And if you look, I mean, Sousa is often described as being someone whose work was very influenced by the West, and he did these nudes. And while he was in New York and London, his language was often very provocative.
Yes.
But again, if you put Sousa's works next to sculptures of Indian goddesses, etc., you'll see that there's an amazing parallel between them. So that continuity is there always. It's just that we're not trained to look at modern art in a certain way. And that came in because we were colonized as a nation and we were told, oh, you don't know, the West knows best, the East knows nothing, etc. And we lost our confidence in ourselves, etc. We're now reclaiming that back, and we're saying, hello, we don't need to be talked down to. We know who we are, and just look at our tradition. We go back 5,000 years and look at our continuous art making practice somewhere. With Husain, there was really no need for a controversy at all, because now the idea of the nude that was made in the West was always voyeuristic. You enjoyed looking at that nude because it was realistic, it was provocative, there was something sensual about it. In the way Hussain is painting it, or we're painting it through our traditional modes, etc., the idea is never to be sensual or to be provocative. You're part of a narrative, it's a story. So the moment I put clothes onto a figure, see how the narrative changes, Rishanka. When I see clothes on to a figure of a woman, because we're talking about the female form over here, immediately the way we're looking at it will change. We'll say this woman is wearing a sari, or she's wearing trousers and a shirt, she's wearing a skirt, or what kind of a sari is she wearing, etc. So I will immediately regionalize
and judge
or judge economic levels. But that is not the narrative the artist wants to reach at.
Sure.
The artist's narrative is telling a story where he doesn't want clothes to define the person. So the narrative has to be more pure. That is the intent you have to keep in mind when you're looking at art.
But what about, and I probably should not be getting into M.F. Husain so much, but this is my last question. What about the Saraswati painting he made?
No, there was never a painting of Saraswati. It was a drawing. It was drawing of a figure. And that's a figure that we've seen growing up all through India, etc. Whether you look at art or whether you look at sculptures, it's always the form without visible clothes on it. So he's created a drawing in a certain narrative, as a certain story over there. There's nothing beyond it. It was never voyeuristic. And if voyeurism is not the intent, why are you penalizing him?
So I think you're saying that your conversations, even with your clients, people who come to you for advice around, these kind of controversies, is very positive, that the intent wasn't wrong.
No, and they're very open because they're looking at art and they've looked at a body of art. So they know what they're looking at. It's you see, very often what happens with the collector also is when you've started collecting and you're young into your collecting journey, etc., you might come in and say, I'm looking for work that I want for my drawing room or bedroom or XYZ or my dining room, but make sure that there isn't a nude figure on it, because I have young girls at home, I have daughters, I have male servants. It's amazing how we become protectionists somewhere, but you don't need to, because this is the best way to explore something. In any case, the servant boy, your helper, is just going to be cleaning after 2 days. It's just another chore for him. So, in so many ways, your horizons open up when you keep your mind open as well.
And I think starting young and talking about these things openly in the house is
absolutely.
so important.
These are discussions that should happen at school level.
Speaking of cleaning, so we've figured out a budget, we've figured out this is what I want to buy. What is the long-term maintenance for a painting? How often should one clean it? Where should they get it cleaned? Can they clean it themselves?
Never do that. The last. Okay. Never, ever clean anything yourself because you're not professionally trained. So what do you do with the paperwork? Paperworks are the most vulnerable because it's a more fragile medium. So make sure, one, art should never be exposed to sunlight. It should be kept away in a space that usually doesn't have dampness, because that creates mold and fungus. Today, you get backing paper, mounts, frames that take care of, that are archival in nature. So they take care of longevity. Canvases should never be put behind glass because canvas needs to breathe. So if it's put behind glass, you'll always see in the rains, it'll wrinkle up. And that starts creating fissures and cracks in the paint surfaces. Overall, try and make sure that temperature is maintained as uniformly as is possible in a given space. Yes, you can't have air conditioning on the house the whole day and night, but extreme temperatures should be managed to some extent. Over a period of time, yes, there will be requirement of conservation or restoration. There are properly trained restorers in the country today. Take it across to them. It is their job to ensure the longevity of art, because, Rishanka, even though you may own art, as in the ownership of art, you're actually only a custodian of it for the generations to come, because art tells your story for all times to come. It's your responsibility.
That's so lovely. Well, this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I could sit here all day talking to you about art, but I've learned so much in this 1 hour. If there was one piece of advice you would give to someone who's on the fence about investing in art, what would that be?
Just go for it. See, you have investments that are your bonds and your debentures and your mutual funds and XYZs, whatever. Fine, you need it.
I call those boring.
Yeah, but it's there.
Yes.
All right. Everything else that gives you your status is a depreciating value. Your shoes, your cars, your clothes.
Even real estate sometimes.
Yeah, though real estate is a good measure of, but how much real estate can you get? Art always appreciates, and you get to live with it, and you enjoy it, and it creates the most wonderful conversations. Why would you not invest in art?
So just go for it.
100%.
Even if you have a small budget. So you said 50 to 1 lakh, 50,000 to 1 lakh is a good starting point.
It's a good starting point. 2 lakhs is where I would say step up. That's where your game really starts.
And are there a few artists you could name that someone can start with?
You know, the masters will always be there. The second category is always there. So from Husain downwards to the Santoshes, we have Rabin Mandals. I can see works around here. Seema Kohli, there's Nasreen Mohammadi, Zarina
So much
Hashmi.
here.
I mean, all the artists, Satish Gupta behind us as we're
Yes.
talking. But when we're talking modest budgets, etc., there are any number of these young people and they need support in the initial stages. So, as I said, find the younger galleries. They are also more interested in creating a community, young communities of young collectors and young investors, and they will become your support system. Go with them.
Thank you so much once again. And I hope to have you again on the show to talk about the next level of art. I think today was more about investment. The next time I want it to be.
100%. I'd so look forward to it, Rishanka. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.